we're excited to talk about 2018 Suede, new release for us. Wow, releasing a 2018 wine here in 2023. We've held on to this one for a while now, and it's going to pay dividends. But let's go back and talk about why and how we started Suede. I remember it was 2013? 13 was the first vintage. Bertus talked us into buying a lot more expensive French oak barrels and knocking the heads off and doing some barrel ferments in them. And when it came time to starting to put together blends, we actually had them all right out here on the crush pad, spread out, and he and I, it was a beautiful sunny day in spring, and we were going through and trying the different lots, and there was a few barrels that just stood out texturally. I don't know why, maybe he can talk to why, but we marked them off and set them aside. We didn't know if they were going to go into Umbrall or what it was, and in the end we decided to bottle it at itself. I think it was about 4 barrels.
Yeah.
And it was all about texture and all about the mouthfeel on the palate. So I'll turn it over to Bertus, and he can talk a little bit about that and how we've ended up here 5 years later with the 2018 and how we make this wine. And I would call it probably one of our flagships. I mean, Mud's Kitchen is very personal to me. Umbrall is a wine that I can drink every night. But, you know, Suede's one of those ones that I think when it gets released, we all just kind of clamor around it because it's so small and so unique. So tell me about this wine and how it came to be.
No, really special. You know, I don't drink Suede very often or every night. But, yeah. Kind of going back a little bit to, again, 13, implementing barrel fermentation for the first time. For us, something I had learned in South Africa, making cab and things down there, really speeding up the early integration.
Yeah, maybe talk a bit about the process and how you do that.
So, you know, looking at red wine making, you know, all the good things you want come from the skins. So you've got your color there, and you've got your tannins there, your texture. And so, you know, we do a lot of things on the winemaking side to maximize, first on the viticulture side to maximize what's there in the beginning, but then on the winemaking side to make sure we get all of that out. The other thing that we kind of have within a grape berry is seed tannins. And so that's a whole different kind of structure. The reason why we don't want a lot of seed tannin is because it's a very aggressive tannin, and so, you know, that's why we really wait for kind of something we use in our winemaking terminology, where we'll kind of say, well, the skins taste amazing, but the seeds aren't ripe yet, and that means we're out in the vineyards literally chewing on grapes and skins and seeds and macerating them in our mouths and going like, well, that's really unpleasant, so I don't think that wine's going to be very pleasant. So, you know, we go through all those steps, but the other thing that we do is once we do barrel fermentation, we're adding a whole nother layer of tannin in there, and that's the tannin coming from an oak barrel. So each of them has a different structural look, feel in your mouth, all these things. And so if you're adding them all at the earliest stage possible, which is pre-fermentation while it's just juice, well, then it can integrate in there and give you much more depth and intensity, and really kind of build your mouthfeel and your texture on the wine. The other thing we found over time doing this now for a few years is that that wine seems super intense when it's kind of just pressed off of the skins, very, very kind of early stages. But 18 months later, the oak is much more integrated. There's much more seamlessness on the palate. No kind of hard edges, nothing poking out. And then, you know, a year down the road from bottling it, 2 years, you kind of really see those wines are
it's almost
just a little bit more
that early extraction just can take it, right? When the berry's so young and flavorful.
It's how we look at it. It's, you know, when we're doing our Cab Franc, Merlot macerations, we're anywhere from 28 to 45 days on the skins. And that's days that it already has in contact with the oak.
Exactly.
And so it's just that integration that I think really makes the difference.
And that was something I learned, because early on in, you know, my career in winemaking, it was always 7 to 10 days and turn it, and maybe because I worked for bigger wineries and they had to turn tanks and stuff. But when you came along and said, you know, we're going to do extended macerations and we're going to do, you know, on the skins for 30, 45 days. You know, I always thought, what I was taught was, well, man, you're gonna get these harsh tannins and stuff. But really, yeah, maybe you do at day 13 and 14, but by day 20 and 25 and 30, it just gets softer and softer and softer. So
and it's a really interesting curve,
right,
you know, where it's too much and then it'll integrate, and then you want more and then it'll integrate. And so you just wait for the sweet spot.
Right.
Hope you're kind of nailing the call of the press, which we can kind of obsess over, you know, day-to-day changes, even changes from the morning to the afternoon. So yeah, that's probably one of my favorite parts of harvest. Now looking at, you know, from where we started in 2013 to where we are now, definitely added over the years, added in a couple new coopers,
right,
and kept kind of fine-tuning cooperages that we liked the results of our barrel fermentations.
Absolutely.
And I think, you know, now we're looking at 2018, as we had kind of earlier said. Unfortunately, 2015 was our final vintage where we pulled 90-something% of our fruit from the estate. So this vintage 2018 has some stagecoach fruit from Atlas Peak. So you've got mountain cab in there, and then a little bit of Calistoga cab from the Kalen vineyard. And so what you can expect from the mountain side is more structure, just a little bit more kind of that mountain intensity. Calistoga, being the warmest AVA here in the valley, gives you a little pop of fruit, but it's a very tiny percentage. The bulk of it is still the estate, our remaining vines. And so Suede, as hopefully most of you will know, for us is a textural wine. You know, when we say Suede, it's not just this kind of fake moniker.
It should taste like Suede in your glass, if you could imagine that. Well, let's go ahead and try the wine and see what we think. Yeah, I mean, the first thing I get is that berry fruit coming through, but how it's coated, right? There's something different on this wine than our other wines. How texturally and it feels on my mouth is it's pretty fascinating, really.
Yeah, it's really, you know, and this wine's been, where are we at now? 2.5 years? Bottle, something like that.
We would have bottled this in 20, so yeah, almost 3.
Almost 3 years in bottle, and it's amazing the freshness on the fruit, on the, you know, the vibrancy on the palate. But it's funny. It's really is like, we joke about the Spinal Tap elements of this wine, but it really goes up to 11.
Yeah, it goes up to 11. That the integration of this oak is remarkable, and it really is a remarkable wine. And honestly, like, it's an expensive wine. You know, we've had some people come in and say, it's a nice wine, it's very expensive, but I can sit here and tell you you know, some of the top wines in the valley are going up now $300-400, $600, $750 a bottle. And I think where we are, I mean, at half the price of, you know, $200 a bottle to whatever it is in the most recent release, I think this wine can literally stand with the most preeminent wines in the valley for sure.
And we're, you know, with this wine, we're talking decades of aging.
Right.
There's, like, it's still going on my palate.
Yeah.
You know, it's not a couple of seconds. Like, this is a couple of minutes where it'll linger with you. But it's so well balanced and it's so refined, and really kind of great to see all of the vintage coming together and giving that in the glass.
Absolutely. Well, thanks for hanging out with me in the cellar. We're a little more dressy than we usually are. No red stained shirts, no boots on, but yeah, I hope you guys have enjoyed our little cellar chats, and we'll do more.